have a Dogman story here you guys may think is pretty interesting. It happens in California. Here's what the man writes. I live in a remote part of Antelope Valley in Southern California, nestled against the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains next to Devil's Punch Bowl Park. My property stretches across 2.5 acres, fenced in and secluded enough that isolation has become its own kind of companion. My nearest neighbor lives a half a mile away, and their porch light is like a distant star on the horizon. The nights are thick with silence and mystery, and for the past 10 years this land has been home, but it's never been entirely mine. Something else claims it too. From the moment I moved in, I felt it, a strange energy that seeped into my bones, both inside the house and out. The quality of the energy wasn't hostile, but it wasn't exactly friendly either. Now, this land is harsh and unforgiving, a high desert sitting directly on the San Andreas Fault. At times, deep underground, subtle rumbles reach the surface, vibrating through my body as though it wants to remind me that it is alive. The previous owners were an elderly couple. They had lived there together for almost 25 years and operated a horse rescue business. Sadly, the lady of the house had recently passed away, and the husband decided to sell the property and move on. I remember one time while I was having a conversation with the man, I felt this strange energy come over me. I took a chance and casually mentioned it to him, then watched his eyes well with tears. I saw a hint of longing in his face, as if he knew exactly what I meant, and I was already missing it. I think all the horses that lived on the property left a kind presence there which still remains despite the negative experiences that I had. In the first few months after I moved in, sleep was not a refuge but a battleground. Night after night, I found myself trapped in the clutches of vivid sleep paralysis. My body was heavy and unyielding, and it felt like it belonged to someone else. Dark, shadowy shapes gathered above me, their forms amorphous and shifting like smoke. Their presence was unmistakably oppressive. They whispered in voices just barely audible, their hissing tones brushing against my ears like an invasive wind. But the worst part was the hand. It was cold and unseen and impossibly strong, and it would wrap around my own, locking it in a crushing grip. No matter how much I strained, I couldn't break free. My hand was immobilized, and I could feel a taunting pressure in its grasp, as if the entity was mocking my helplessness. To every night, the terror grew worse. I felt violated, like a prisoner in my own bed, unable to defend myself against an enemy that I could not see. For weeks, I endured this, too afraid to fight back, unsure if I even could. But one night, the fear gave way to anger, pure, unfiltered anger, and I had had enough. Lying there, unable to move, I summoned every ounce of courage I had. My voice didn't reach my lips, but it echoed in my mind loud and defiant. You've had your fun, and you wanted to terrorize me, and you succeeded, but no more. Enough of this nonsense. Leave me. Kill me if you must, but you'll never win. The room fell deathly silent, the kind of silence that feels alive, pressing against your ears. And then, as quickly as they had come, the shadows receded. The whispers stopped, the crushing grip on my hand released, leaving me trembling but free. That was the last night they visited. I don't know if it was my defiance or something else that drove them away, but they left. The house felt quieter after that. It was less heavy, though the memory of those nights still lingered like a scar. I won that battle, but I've never been certain of the war. Although the house became quieter after that, outside, the feeling of being watched grew stronger, especially at night. Still today, and every evening, even when I arrive home and step out of my car to open the gate, I feel the eyes on me. Not human eyes. There's something else, something heavy and deliberate. I walk my property at night with my 3 fearless, massive wolfhounds, and on some nights they stop dead in their tracks, refusing to move. Their hackles rise and their gazes fix on the darkness. The first few times panic gripped me. It was as if an invisible line had been drawn, one I dared not cross. My fear was a tangible thing, gripping me tighter with every step. And then I heard it, a voice in my mind, calm but commanding. "As long as you don't actively look for me, you'll be fine," it said. The voice was not a threat but a warning, and the words lingered, and while they didn't erase the fear, they dulled its edge. And since that night, I stayed on my side of the line, keeping my walks brief and my gaze low, but the presence never left. The nights when the coyotes howled were almost comforting, their calls familiar and alive. But then there were the silent nights when my dogs, usually very bold, stood frozen, ears flat, refusing to bark. Those were the nights I knew that it was near. Since then, I never sought it out, never tried to pierce the veil of darkness around me, but sometimes I can't help but wonder as I stand under the vast, starless sky, what watches from the shadows and why does it let me stay? I've seen it only in glimpses, the blackest of black shadows, and low to the ground with the unmistakable shape of a massive canine. It never crosses the boundary, but it doesn't have to, because I don't challenge it. Somehow I know that would be my undoing. For 10 years I've called this place home, yet every night reminds me that I'm not alone. The truce that I've struck with whatever claims this land has held steady, but the uneasy balance is not without its moments. Living here means accepting the inexplicable as part of life, like the black shadows I've glimpsed in the corner of my eye, or the faint vibrations underfoot when the earth seems to breathe. One night about 2 years ago, I experienced something I still struggle to make sense of. It was a quiet, moonless evening, the kind of night where the darkness felt heavier than usual. The air was colder than it should have been for the season. It was almost damp, and my dogs were restless. I stepped out to take them for a walk around the perimeter, but they wouldn't budge from the porch. Their bodies were stiff, their tails were low, and eyes were locked on the tree line at the edge of the property. And that's when I saw it, something massive moving just beyond the fence. Its shape was indistinct, cloaked in the shadow, but its sheer size ruled out any ordinary predator. That wasn't a coyote or a mountain lion. It was something bigger, heavier, and utterly alien in the way it moved. At first, it seemed to glide without effort, but then its motion fragmented and shuddered like an image caught in a flickering light. It was as if it existed in flashes, each appearance momentarily bending the darkness around it like ripples in black water. The effect was hypnotic and deeply unsettling, as though the creature was not entirely bound to the same reality that I inhabited. I froze there and stood, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. A low rumbling growl rose from my dogs, and the sound reverberated through the still night air. But even then, they did not move closer. The creature stopped abruptly, and the shifting light seemed to dissolve into stillness. That's when I saw them, two glowing orbs, unmistakably eyes, shining with a faint, otherworldly luminescence. They reflected a light that wasn't there, as if pulling brightness from some unseen source. Those eyes locked onto me, unblinking, steady, and impossibly knowing. I couldn't move. The weight of its gaze pinned me in place, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Whatever it wasn't just watching, it was evaluating. It didn't run, and I couldn't. Instead, I slowly backed into the house, and my dogs followed close behind. The thing didn't follow, but its presence lingered like a weight on my chest. Another time I came home late from work, and as usual I stepped out of my car to open the gate. The air was still, but the feeling of being watched was so intense that it felt like a hand pressing on my shoulder. I hurried to the gate and fumbled with the lock, and then I heard it, a low growl not far behind me. Spinning around, I saw nothing but the dark expanse of my yard. My dogs were inside the house, barking furiously, their voices muffled by the thick walls. The most unsettling experience happened last winter. I was in bed, drifting to sleep, when I heard scratching at my bedroom window. My bedroom is on the second floor. I lay there paralyzed, listening to the steady, deliberate sound. It wasn't the wind or a tree branch. The scratches were too purposeful, too rhythmic. Gathering my courage, I peeked through the curtain, and there was nothing there, just the faint outline of the tree swaying in the wind. But as I turned away, I saw a faint outline in the frost on the glass in the shape of a massive paw. Despite everything, I've come to respect this land deeply. I never push its boundaries and tread with humility. I think that's why it lets me stay. We share this land, me and whatever watches from the shadows, and for now that uneasy truce is enough. But even now, as I write this, I can feel it. It's outside in the dark. Something is waiting and watching. It's always watching. Oh, I read this story cold. I had not read it before I pulled it up. Rebecca, my editor, just actually sent it to me today, and I thought, I'm just going to knock out one story today in a podcast and get it out, and then I'm going to get to work. I'm so blown away by the way this guy can write. Holy smokes. And I think it's a guy. I'm almost sure it is. Doesn't give his name, so I don't know if it's a man or a woman. It's written kind of in a masculine sense, and it has a masculine feel to it, but who knows? More than the story, it's the writing that really stood out to me on this. Did you guys like that? Hey, I am pretty busy these days, so what I may do is just do one story per podcast, or maybe 2 short stories. Just get some shorter podcasts out to keep things rolling. Man, if I go too many days without doing this podcast, I start jonesing for it. Know what I mean? I start getting, antsy, and it feels like I kind of lose it's like I open up a file to read and I can't read anymore. So I got to keep doing it to be able to keep doing this. So that's what, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just blabbering. That's what I do. Hey, thank y'all for listening. Hey, I wanted to say one more thing before I get off this podcast. I don't know if you guys watch TikTok, but there's a guy, and I don't watch it much. I only follow maybe, 2 or 3 dozen channels. I'm normally just, it's usually while I'm in the bathroom. I'm just flipping through videos. But there's a guy from Kentucky. He's a truck driver. The name of his TikTok handle is Peterbilt71. He does all kind of stuff. He drives a big Peterbilt. It's an older model Peterbilt, but he pulled the camera out of his truck the other day, and there's that big old Peterbilt with that big snout sticking out on the front and a sleeper behind it, and he's pulling a lowboy with a big excavator on the back. I don't know. I just admire those guys. I wish I knew how to drive one of those trucks. I'd love to do that for a living. But he also he also does these little short 1-minute videos sitting in his truck eating lunch, and whenever I watch him eat, it reminds me of me and my grandfather and the stuff my grandfather would feed me. I can't tell you how many times my grandfather and I would sit on the back porch in the summer, and he'd get a pack of hot dogs, cut them open, hand me one, just raw, cold hot dog. We'd have a pack of crackers and a block of cheese, sharp cheddar cheese. And we just sit there and eat hot dogs and crackers and cheese and Vienna sausages and other kind of sausages you can get in a can. But he eats a lot of these canned meats and canned, anyway, I can't do the sardines and some of the things he does. This guy will eat anything, but I know where he gets it from because he came up eating that way. And when you come up eating that way, you always eat that way. But I just love him. I love his personality. I don't know his name. Peterbilt71. Y'all look him up on TikTok. He may be on YouTube too. I don't know. But if you watch TikTok, I just love the guy, and I just wanted to give him a shout out. He's a truck driver. He may hear this. He may not. I don't know. But Peterbilt71, you the man. You make me hungry every time I watch your videos, brother. All right, thank y'all for watching the podcast or listening to the podcast, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.